on this issue, and then, of course, the very important intelligence authorization bill. And then tonight, I hope we can have, again, these areas of agreement so that we can get our fellow Americans who've been losing their homes, their businesses, and their jobs back on track. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, is recognized.
Yield myself 30 seconds to respond before I further yield. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman from California laid down an excellent framework for the potential of the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction to accomplish their mandate, namely bringing down tax rates by eliminating loopholes in a way that effectively eliminates expenditures in the tax code. For whether something is a subsidy or a tax credit, it is very much an expenditure. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield 2.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
I want to join with my colleagues, first of all, to wish the President well and to work together in a bipartisan manner to put Americans back to work, put them to work now and keep them working. I am both supportive of the intelligence authorization bill for a number of reasons, dealing with the issue of investing in new positions to select high priority needs as FBI surveillance, so increasing the personnel. I'm concerned about the cuts in personnel. The language is where appropriate. In these days, as we celebrate 9/11, I'm concerned about what is appropriate. I'm also interested in moving forward on diversity. We should ensure that our intelligence community reflects the diversity of America, from African Americans to Asians, Latinos, Muslims, people speaking different languages, to be more effective to protect this country. The DNI is going to conduct and review to determine the security implications of moving intelligence systems. I think that is important. I think it is important as well to collect information about drug trafficking, and I certainly think it's important to, again, as I said, talk about the question of the workforce. I am concerned about the request that I understand may be in the bill on information about Guantanamo Bay detainees, information that could undermine our security, and I am questioning the value of making the Director of National Security Agency a Senate conferee to juxtapose that person in the midst of controversial politics. But I am glad, and I thank Mr. Polis for his leadership on charter schools. I'm proud to say that I've been to the Victory Charter School in Texas, in Houston, the Harmony Charter School, the KIPP Charter School, the Yes Charter School, and a school district, a public school system that I am working with, and I love public schools. I am a product of public schools, and North Forest Independent School District is finding its way to embrace and coalesce with charter schools. What is the call for that? It is the education of our children with the most important level of education ever, excellence. It is for our children to pass tests, but it is for our children to think and to create and to invent. And I think we can work with charter schools in particular who are focusing on science, technology, engineering, and math, where there are young people who are actually doing medical center level research, cures by middle schoolers and high schoolers. So I hope that we will deal with the intelligence bill. I associate myself with the gentleman from Massachusetts. I'm concerned about the human rights violations in Colombia, the monies that may be going to the DOS, and the killing of trade unionists. It's all right to be a neighbor, but it is horrible to take intelligence funds and be part of the killing of trade unionists. I yield back, and I hope we can change that.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2.5 minutes to the whip, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Virginia. I also thank the gentlelady as well. While I would prefer for us to be addressing a reauthorization of No Child Left Behind, today's legislation reflects bipartisan support for innovation in public schools and improving educational opportunities for students who still lack access to a high-quality education. Now, I know this rule that we are dealing with deals with both bills. I'm for the rule. I think it's a rule that provides for two pieces of legislation that have enjoyed bipartisan support. The Chesapeake Public Charter School, K-8 school located in my district, has developed a year-round school model which embeds the art and environmental studies throughout its curriculum. This school hopes to one day expand its successful model through its existing charter with our local school system, and would be able to do so with funding from this bill. As we consider this bill today, it's unfortunate that after 9 months in session, however, we have still not bringing jobs bill to this floor. So today and throughout the fall, Democrats will offer Make It in America amendments at every opportunity to highlight ways we can create jobs and strengthen our economy. Today, Democrats are proposing two Make It in America amendments. I would say parenthetically that Mr. Garamendi had an excellent amendment. Wasn't made in order. He's going to ask that we get to it by the previous question. Congressman Lujan's amendment, however, focuses on sharing best practices in instruction and professional development in the STEM subjects to develop a more competitive and highly skilled workforce. America needs that. And Congresswoman Davis's amendment reminds us that the primary objective of this bill is to use the innovation of charter schools to improve educational outcomes so all students can make it in America. The jobs of the future require high-quality elementary and secondary education, which lead to high-quality post-secondary education and training components. We need to make sure that we are preparing students for the diversity of jobs that await them, the jobs that will bring home good wages, the jobs that will improve our economy in the long term. I believe charter schools can play a valuable role in that objective, which is why I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I'd be glad to yield on how much time I have left.
Well, I appreciate that. We've got a great charter school dealing with science and technology in Apple Valley, California.
30 seconds.
Gentleman has an additional 30 seconds.
In Apple Valley, California, it's a fabulous school, and that model is working with our local people, creating opportunities for jobs, et cetera. I like your idea. I may very well join you in some of those amendments, but at least join you in supporting this bill.
Let me say, I'm reclaiming my time, when I speak about Make It in America, there is not a person on this floor, the most conservative, the most liberal, and everybody in between, who is not for our young people and all of our people making it in America. I'm hopeful that we can forge a bipartisan coalition to promote legislation which will promote making it in America.
If the gentleman would yield further, if we can get the teachers union aboard, I think I'd like
that. I'd be glad to.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Maybe Ms. Fox will yield you 30 seconds, and I'll be glad to yield.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves. A gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be happy to yield the gentleman from California 30 seconds.
Presuming that, I mean, this is really a good idea. If we can get all the teachers' unions in California to join us in this sponsoring of charter schools, then I'd really get excited about it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized. Mr. Polis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to make Mr. Garamendi's of California's amendment in order. Mr. Garamendi has joined us here, and I'd like to yield him 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday I proposed to the Rules Committee an amendment about making it in America. One more way we can build jobs here in this country by using our own tax money. In the charter schools legislation, there's some $300 million a year authorized for the construction of charter schools, the enhancement, the improvement of those schools. Now, where will the material come from? Where will the heating air conditioning systems be manufactured? Where will the lumber, the concrete, the other materials, the high-tech equipment come from? Will it be American-made, or will it be made over in China and imported into the United States? It seems to me we're about to use $300 million of our tax money, that is the American taxpayers' money, to build some schools or to improve some charter schools. All well and good. But why don't we create some jobs in addition to that? Why don't we put into this bill an amendment that simply says that the Secretary of Education, in prioritizing the grants, shall give higher priority to those proposals that would use American-made equipment, American-made jobs. We can, and I thank my colleague from California, Mr. Lewis, for agreeing that we ought to be making it in America. This amendment was rejected for reasons unknown to me, by the Rules Committee, perhaps known to them. And if Mr. Dreyer were here, or maybe I should ask Ms. Fox, why was this objected to? Why was it not made possible to put this amendment on the floor so that we can create American jobs? I would note that we're 247 days into this session and not one bill has been put forward by the Republican minority or majority to advance jobs. Here's a little chance for us to do it. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time. I have two colleagues. I would yield my remaining time to my colleague. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would only say to the gentleman from California that Republicans have passed many, many bills in this session that would help to create jobs in this country. I did a little research this morning on what has happened with bills that have gone over to the Senate. A total of 28 bills have passed the Senate, the House and the Senate, and been sent to the President for his signature. Of those, only 6 were substantive bills. One of those was the 1099, one was the continuing resolution, one was DOD appropriations, a couple of bills were bills that came from here, one on lead for toys. I think the gentleman from California needs to look to the other body to see what is happening to the bills that are passing out of the House that would create hundreds of thousands of jobs for Americans. The problem is not in the House. The problem is in the Senate that, as one headline said and one senator said, the Senate is moribund, and I believe that's where the problem lies. It is not with Republicans in the House. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The urgent priority of this country, and should be of this Congress, is to get Americans back to work. There's not a corner of this country that's not been severely afflicted by the unemployment crisis in this country. Mr. Garamendi proposes that we take a simple idea and put it into this bill, and I think he's absolutely right. Here's the idea. If we spend a significant amount of money, I think it's $300 million, for the purpose of retrofitting and maybe building some schools around the country, let's give a preference to schools that use American-made products and American-made goods over those that do not. I think that's a very common-sense idea. So if a school is going to put in solar panels to become more energy efficient, and they can either buy the solar panels from a company here in the United States or one in Asia, let's favor the school that buys the solar panels from the United States to create jobs here. This is a simple and good idea. It should be on the floor so that we could debate it. Now, the dialogue I just heard was, it's the Senate's fault or it's this one's fault. With all due respect to all of our colleagues, Mr. Speaker, the days of whose fault it is are over, long since over, and the time has long since passed for us to get to work passing common sense legislation that puts the American people back to work. Mr. Garamendi has proposed just such a common sense piece of legislation. I would urge people to vote no on the previous question so we can consider Mr. Garamendi's amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Colorado has 6.5 minutes remaining. The gentlewoman from North Carolina has 14.5 minutes remaining. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll continue to reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I rise also to support the effort of my colleague, Mr. Garamendi, to require that materials made in America be used to construct and renovate the charter schools that we're talking about in this legislation. You know, we have a serious issue in this country, in case the Republicans haven't noticed, that we need to create as many jobs as we can. And if anybody has made a speech about job creation these days, talking about making it in America is a definite applause line. I would just like to recommend that making it in America is something that really has resonated with people all around this country. Why would we take taxpayer dollars when we could spend it on products that are made right here, including the building materials that we need to upgrade, to create more schools in our country, and buy products that are made overseas and support jobs that are outside of our country? You know, the issue in this bill of creating more schools is so important. In the United States, schools on average are 40 years old and actually in need of an estimated $500 billion in repairs and upgrades. I'm actually introducing a piece of legislation next week that would provide $100 billion to repair, renovate, modernize America's schools, and would create 400,000 construction and 250,000 maintenance jobs alone. But in addition, what we should be doing is rejecting this previous question that's up before us so that we can make a good bill even better. This is a bipartisan effort. We've heard from the other side of the aisle that these are good ideas. Let's make it better. Vote no, and let's add the Garamendi amendment.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll continue to reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Colorado.
I'd like to inquire as to whether my colleague has any remaining speakers.
Mr. Speaker, we do not have any remaining speakers, and I'm prepared to close at any time.
Gentleman from Colorado.
Very good. I'm prepared to close. I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Intelligence Authorization Act is not perfect. There are some provisions that have already received a veto threat from the President and need to be amended. Thankfully, the Chairman and the Ranking Member have worked together to submit a manager's amendment that would do just that. It's vital that this manager's amendment pass because of two provisions in particular. The first would make the Director of the National Security Agency a Senate-confirmed position. This would unnecessarily politicize one of our most critical intelligence needs. Traditionally, this position has already been indirectly subject to confirmation through the Senate's confirmation of military officers who've been promoted into the position. We can't afford to damage the management of the intelligence community in this manner. The second provision would modify the reporting requirements regarding Guantanamo detainees. This would require the Director of National Intelligence to provide state-performing cables to intelligence communities. While effective oversight is an essential role of Congress, we also must not interfere with the ability of State Department to conduct effective diplomatic negotiations. Therefore, I call on my colleagues to support the manager's amendment as well as the amended version of the underlying bill. I also want to thank, with regard to the charter school bill, Chairman Klein and Ranking Member Miller for their excellent work both on the bill as well as their manager's amendment that would improve the bill in a wide variety of ways, including prioritizing states that authorize charters to be their own school food authorities so that they can serve healthy meals to their students, including transportation considerations to help ensure that kids have access and that choice is made more meaningful by ensuring that families who don't have the ability to carpool or transport their kids to school also have choices within the public education system. This truly bipartisan bill and manager's amendment really exemplify what the House can do to support good public education and improve student outcome. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Hoyer, who said that this is a start. And while many of us would rather see a full reauthorization of ESEA, there's a very promising start to what will hopefully be a very productive session with regard to education, one of the most important goals of this Congress, as well as absolutely necessary to improve the economy in the long run. Unfortunately, one of the amendments disallowed by the Republican majority under this rule is one that I propose to help facilitate charter schools in obtaining federal competitive grant funding by adding priority for states that allow charter schools to be LEAs, or local education agencies. Effectively, my amendment would have reduced paperwork and overhead if the school districts and charter schools agreed. The charter schools themselves could effectively function as their own fiscal agent for federal purposes and to compete for federal grants. What happens now, and it works in most cases 9 out of 10 times, unfortunately it's the cases where it doesn't work out that cause the difficulty, is charter schools have to go through their LEA, either their authorizing institute or their school district, in order to apply for federal grants. What does this mean? It means there's another set of bureaucrats' eyes that have to see every proposal, another person that has to sign off. Sometimes this can lead to unnecessary delays. At worst, it can lead to missing deadlines if funding applications are submitted to districts and not turned around in enough time to meet federal deadlines for grant funding. So it would be nice to continue to work on with this committee, and I think that many of us would like to see charter schools recognized as LEAs for purposes of federal funding. I'm proud to say that in my home state of Colorado, we were able to get this fixed in the last legislative session, and now charter schools are recognized as LEAs. And in fact, about half the states allow charter schools to be LEAs for federal purposes. A key goal of the bill is to ensure charter schools have equitable funding as well. And, Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I'll offer an amendment to the rule to make in order an amendment by Mr. Garamendi of California to give priority to eligible entities who are working with charter schools that plan to use materials made in America for the construction and renovation of school facilities. Once again, it would make that amendment in order and allow for discussion and vote by the House on that amendment. Republicans blocked this germane amendment last night in the Rules Committee by a party line vote. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment into the record along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote no and defeat the previous question so we can help American workers and allow this House to deliberate on an amendment that deserves debate in this body. I urge a no vote on the rule as well, having left off several amendments that would otherwise improve these bipartisan bills, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Colorado yields back his time. Gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge my colleagues to vote for the rule. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Gentleman from Colorado.
On that, I ask for the yeas and the nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the Chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption. This is a 15-minute vote.
The House today has been working on a rule that is really a multi-purpose rule. It covers two bills, one of which is a bill expanding charter schools in the U.S., and if the rule passes, the House will take up debate on that, an hour of general debate and 8 amendments to be considered. It also contains the rule for debate for the Intelligence Authorization Bill, and that bill is likely to come up tomorrow. And this rule also provides that a resolution of disapproval relating to the debt limit shall be in order only if offered by the majority leader. That is part of the debt agreement. And a reminder that the Joint Committee on Deficit Reduction had their first meeting today. We're going to show that to you later in our program schedule on the C-SPAN networks. 2 votes here. This is a procedural vote. It's 15 minutes, and a vote on the rule following this will be 5 minutes. A number of briefings today on Capitol Hill ahead of the President's job speech tonight at 7. Speaker Boehner said earlier today that government regulations and taxes are stifling American job growth. In a briefing with other Republican leaders, he said that the administration's tax policies force businesses to move their operations overseas. Speaker Boehner has invited several small business owners to sit with him at the job speech tonight. Here's that briefing from earlier today.
Good morning, everyone. We had our weekly meeting of the House Republican Conference, and you know, all year Republicans have been listening to the American people. They've asked us to focus on the economy and jobs, and we've moved well over a dozen bills out of the House that would roll back unnecessary regulations that are strangling America's economy. Tonight, we're going to welcome the President of the United States to the House, but the members won't be the only people listening. I've invited 12 job creators, 12 employers from around the country to sit in my box. People with a real-world experience about how the regulations that are coming out of this administration are impeding their ability to grow their business and to create jobs. I'm hopeful that after the President gives his speech that we'll be able to sit down in a bipartisan way and find common ground that will help improve our economy and improve the job picture for the American people.
Good morning. Coming off of the August recess, what I felt, and I think most of my colleagues felt, when we went out and met with our constituents, was a real fear that has set in on the part of the American people. And the fear has to do with an economic future that is extremely uncertain and doesn't bode well for them or their families. We intend to do something about that as we're now back in town. We are going to embark upon an agenda that is squarely focused on job creation and to try and get this economy going again. It's a two-pronged agenda. It is to roll back job-crushing regulations to create middle-class jobs, and it is to promote policies for tax relief for small businesses that can create middle-class jobs. Now, we also heard, as we were traveling in our districts, a real concern on the part of the people we represent that Washington can't get along and that somehow the differences have gotten in the way. I also heard that from people that we know that Republicans and Democrats are not going to agree on everything. But I do think that the people of my district and this country expect the fact that we're not going to let those differences get in the way of coming together for common sense solutions that help produce results. And that will be our aim over the next several months.
Well, as you heard from the Speaker and the Leader, we just got out of our conference, and we listened to a lot of members that talked about what they heard back in their district. One thing that we all know is the greatest creator of jobs in America is small business. Tonight I'll be listening very intensely because I want to see what empowers entrepreneurs. It is the strength of America. I know when I was 20 years old I started my first business. And I think about the uncertainty today of how many others would take that same risk today. So we're looking at places that we can work with this President to empower the entrepreneur to get America working again.
I'm hoping that tonight will be a cornerstone in the President and the Congress starting to work together to get America back to work. And while I was home, I held a number of small business roundtables with farmers, with manufacturers, with technology companies. And there is a lot of fear, and there's a lot of frustration. And they talked about how the federal government is making it harder, whether it is increased costs, increased requirements, and the record number of regulations that are coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. The House Republicans are committed to being a part of a solution and putting forward policies that are going to help put America back to work. That is our priority as we go into the fall. And just look at Europe today. There is a limit to what big government policies can do. You hit a wall. And here in America, we need to change course, and we need to make sure that we are working on policies together that will get our economy going and keep that American dream alive.
The scope and breadth and cost of Washington has a throttle hold on this economy. Speaker Boehner mentioned a couple of minutes ago highlighting entrepreneurs, highlighting job creators. And I think it's important for us to highlight this notion of a very small, obscure federal regulation, which may seem like nothing. When you cast that out into the economy, it has a huge impact. Let me just highlight two of the individuals who are going to be in the Speaker's box tonight and on this theme of job creation and the adverse impact of foolish regulation. One is Spencer Whiteman. He's a cement manufacturer from Alabama that stopped a construction project of $350 million, a cement kiln, because of proposed cement regulations at the EPA. Leader Cantor has announced that the House will be addressing this very issue next month. Or people like Rock, the farmer from my home state of Illinois, who got famous a few weeks ago, who essentially pleaded with President Obama when he said this: "Please don't challenge us with more rules and regulations from Washington, D.C. that hinder us." Those faces and 10 others with them are really the bright line and a way forward for us to follow, to listen to what the job creators are saying, to try and reflect those policies back into solutions that ultimately create a buoyancy in our economy.
On the way to the airport yesterday, I was pleased to have 14 small businessmen join me just to have a cup of coffee and get their ideas about what it takes to get jobs started back in this country. And what they said was very clear. They said they are very concerned that this administration and the government is creating a world that creates nothing but fear for those who create jobs, because the playing field not only changes, but the very foundation of their businesses changes. What are the taxes going to be? What's the cost of health care going to be? What new regulation is going to be dropping in my lap that's going to cost me so much that I can't afford not only to keep my present employees, much less to create new employees? And this was across the board. These were small business people and advisors to small business people, and they all said, if the President has anything great to say tonight, he'll say that he's stepping up and telling the regulators to back off and have given analysis to make sure that what their regulations are doing is not killing jobs in America. And if we would hear that from the President tonight, and I would hope we will, that would be a great step forward to leveling the playing field and letting us get back to putting people back to work.
As you can hear, one of the things that we all learned in August is that the American people realize the status quo is not getting us where we need to be when it comes to job creation. What we have heard is that they really are weary of speeches. What they're looking for is solutions, and they're looking for results. My guest tonight, who will be with the Speaker's box, is Henry Juskowitz, the CEO of Gibson Guitar. This is a great Tennessee company located in Nashville and in Memphis, and they produce a product that is used around the world with Gibson guitars. And Henry is the type CEO who is doing the right thing, trying to create jobs, training employees, producing a product that people want. We need more of that. We need less of the overreach of the policies that are coming from this administration. My hope is that the President will listen to these employers and job creators and will help get America back to work.
Mr. Speaker, the White House has already gone public with some of the ideas the President's going to talk about tonight, ideas like the payroll tax cuts being extended, infrastructure spending, and additional unemployment insurance. Do you see any common ground possible there on those types of things?
Well, I think it's important for us to wait and listen to what the President has to outline and do so in a way where, in my case, I'm going to be looking for where's the common ground? What is it that we can't agree on? We know that the two parties aren't going to agree on everything. But the American people want us to find common ground, and I'll be looking for it.
Leader Pelosi has said that the decision of Republicans to not respond to the speech tonight is disrespectful. Do you think that's true, or what do you say to that?
Listen, this is not a State of the Union address. The American people shouldn't be forced to watch some politician they don't want to listen to. And frankly, most of them would rather watch a football game. We have opened up Statuary Hall so that all of our members can respond individually. And I think it's a more appropriate and respectful way to go forward.
Mr. Speaker, several of your members, for a moment, and maybe Ms. Blackman can address this too. The signal, or if there's a signal that you're trying to send by having, I know you have these business leaders coming in, specifically the CEO of Gibson, considering the raid a couple of weeks ago, and what this means, the juxtaposition of having him here with what happened to you.
Listen, all year we've been focused on the regulatory onslaught that's coming out of the administration. There are hundreds and hundreds of regulations that are going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars. And what that does, it raises the cost of doing business in the United States, makes it more difficult for employers to expand their business, and in many cases, forcing employers to relocate their facilities overseas, denying Americans the opportunity to have those jobs. I think bringing those employers here does put a real face on how these regulations impact these businesses specifically. And with that, let me yield to Marcia.
I appreciate that, Chad. You know, one of the things that we're looking at is we have businesses who seek to comply and work within the framework of the law. I think the question that comes from many of us is, why was it carried forth in this manner? And what is the intent? If there are rules and regulations that need to be complied with, if there's a question about, then let's provide the clarity. What our goal is to make certain that there are more job opportunities and more manufacturing opportunities here, not less.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Kinner's talked about a kind of new era of stability going forward these next few months, but several of your members have said they will not even attend the President's speech tonight. They don't view it worthwhile. Are you okay with that?
I have encouraged my colleagues to come tonight and to listen to the President. He is the President of the United States, and I believe that, that all members ought to be here and do this. Doesn't mean they're going to. Remember, I'm just the Speaker. All right? We've got 434 colleagues who have their own opinions, and they're entitled to them. But as an institution, the President's coming at our invitation. We ought to be respectful, and we ought to welcome him. Thanks, everybody.
House Republican leadership from earlier today. On the House floor, this is a procedural vote ahead of a vote on the rule for two bills, the charter school bill, expanding charter schools in the U.S. If the rule passes, they will debate that bill, an hour of general debate and 8 amendments to be considered. The rule also covers the intelligence authorization bill, and the House is likely to get around to that bill tomorrow. So this first vote is 15 minutes, and the following vote will be 5 minutes. Lots of talk there about the President's job speech tonight, which gets underway at 7 o'clock. The speech scheduled to start at 7, although we expect House coverage to start around 6:30 or so when members come into the House, and that's when our coverage will get underway here on C-SPAN. A reminder, you can, of course, follow the speech here. You can follow online and post your comments at facebook.com/C-SPAN. And we will follow the President's speech with your phone calls and other comments as well. Well, while this vote continues, we'll bring you some thoughts from the Senate Budget Committee Ranking Member Jeff Sessions. He said today that the current debt crisis is a job crisis, and that the key to job creation is bringing down the deficit. Bringing down the deficit is economic growth. He was joined by other members of the Senate Republican Conference, speaking to reporters about what they expect to hear in the President's comments tonight. It runs about 20 minutes, and we'll show you as much as we can while this vote continues.
Good morning. President Obama is coming to the Congress tonight to talk about jobs at a time when we've had persistent unemployment at a greater level than at any time since the Great Depression. This is exactly the subject that we ought to be dealing with. And this is a speech the President should have made 2.5 years ago instead of proposing a change in the health care law that actually took a health care delivery system that cost too much and expanded it with mandates and taxes that made it harder and more difficult to create jobs. No one blames the President for the economy he inherited, but he should take responsibility for, by his policies, making it worse. Whether it's the health care mandates and taxes, whether it's undermining the right to work law, whether it's running up the debt, whether it's a smothering wet blanket of regulations spread across job growth in this country, all of those policies by the President have made the economy worse. Republicans are ready to work with the President and to make it easier and cheaper to create private sector jobs. We've suggested a number of ways to do that. Lower tax rates with fewer loopholes, fewer regulations. The President could send the 3 trade agreements that have literally been on his desk Since the day he took office, in our state of Tennessee alone, it would permit us to sell auto parts and things that we grow around the world, adding thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. We could work on lower health care costs, workforce training, and we could find more American energy and use less of it. These are all ways to create an environment in which it's easier and cheaper to create private sector jobs. But unfortunately, the President's policies have made it worse. They've thrown a big wet blanket over the economy. We're hoping that his proposals tonight will show how we can make it better. Senator Thune is chairman of the Republican Policy Committee.
Thanks, Lamar. You know, I think that the record that the President has put up is pretty clear. And I think tonight you're going to see probably some of the same plays called from the same old playbook. But his hopeless economic policies are costing too much and making the economy worse. His hopeless economic policies are costing jobs in our economy and making it worse. His hopeless economic policies are costing us economic growth and making matters worse. And you don't have to look very far. It's all out there. Since this President took office, there are 2 million more people unemployed than there were when he came to office. The debt has gone up 39% since he took office. The number of people who are on food stamps have gone up 41% since he took office. Gas prices have nearly doubled since he took office. Health care costs are up 19%, notwithstanding the assertions during the health care debate that it was going to lower health care costs for people in this country. That is the economic record associated with this President's policies. And so we are certainly hoping that he is willing to change those policies and to try a new direction. And so as we anticipate what he's going to say this evening, we're somewhat hopeful and optimistic that that will be the case, but it would be the triumph of hope over experience, because what we've seen with this President over and over again is a gap between what he says and what he does. He says some of the right things, but his policies tell an entirely different story. And so as we look at the impact that his policies are having on the economy right now, the way that it's costing us jobs, the way that it's running up massive amounts of debt, we believe that it's time that this President actually work together with us on things that will add jobs in this country, will create economic growth, and get the country back on the right track. And you heard Senator Alexander say that we believe there are a number of things that the President could do. Serious tax reform, we believe, could go a long ways toward creating a lot more economic growth in this country, getting people back to work. There are trade bills, trade agreements that have been negotiated years ago that have been languishing since this President took office, and so we're still awaiting him sending those up here for ratification. Obviously, the message that I heard over and over again in South Dakota, in which I think all of my colleagues would echo during the August break, was get the government off our backs. These excessive regulations, the red tape is hamstringing our small businesses' ability to put people back to work and to invest in their businesses. And we would love to work with this President to roll back a lot of these regulations that are driving up the cost of business in this country, making it more difficult for our job creators to create jobs, and making our economy worse. It is, as Senator Alexander said, throwing a wet blanket over our economy at the time when we can least afford it. We ought to be looking for ways to enable economic growth and to create jobs rather than making it more costly, more difficult, more expensive for our job creators to do just that. So we hope that the President will sound a different tone tonight and come to us with a different agenda. And so we'll, like I said, we'll hope that that's the case and wait and see what he has to say. Senator Sessions.
Thank you, John. The debt crisis, the debt is a job crisis. There's no doubt about it that the debt of the United States is causing great concern throughout our entire economy. That is therefore costing jobs. We also have the Rogoff-Reinhardt study that says that when your deficit reaches 90% of GDP, you suffer economic growth loss. And that's from 1 to 2%. I've been using the 1% loss, but the numbers really was 1 to 2%. And the numbers they were using, this was not a theoretical study, but an empirical study of sovereign debt problems that countries around the world have had. Their numbers were gross debt. Our gross debt hit 90% of GDP early this year, have already exceeded 100% of GDP this year, and that could well be the explanation for the decline in growth that was projected. In other words, if we were projecting almost 3% growth the first half of this fiscal year, we're going to come in below 1%. I see that the OECD is predicting much lower growth for the United States in the second half than they had projected just a few months ago. And so, is this a factor? I believe it is. So what I say is we've got to ask ourselves, can we run up more debt in an attempt to stimulate the economy today and get a net benefit to growth and jobs? The White House has said that 1% difference in growth, 1% difference in GDP will add 1 million jobs to this economy. So growth is the key to job creation. Growth is the key to helping bring down our deficit. But we're not going to be able to do it, I believe, with more borrowing and more debt. So I'll be looking tonight to see if this proposal is indeed paid for, or is it just another attempt to gain a sugar high by immediate spending that will increase our debt and actually weaken our economy and job creation now, not in the future, now. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming here. I'm new to town. My background is as a manufacturer and business owner, and I've been building the same business for about 31 years. I've made investment decisions. I've made decisions to hire people, and I've got firsthand knowledge the fact that there's such a high level of uncertainty, such a lack of confidence, that just freezes the actions of business, and that's really what's keeping our economy from growing. And the fact of the matter is, yes, President Obama did come into office with a very uncertain economy, but his policies have made matters worse. Senator Thune just ticked off all the metrics that basically prove that point. I mean, when you add $4 trillion to our nation's debt, when you drive that debt to GDP ratio up over 100%, when you pass a health care law, rather than concentrate on economic policies for growth and job creation, when you pass Dodd-Frank that is starving small to medium-sized businesses of capital, when you put your agencies on regulatory hyperdrive, that creates such a high level of uncertainty that businesses simply are afraid to invest. They're afraid to put on additional workers. So if I were going to be proposing a job program, the absolute first step I would propose would be the total repeal of the Obama agenda. Repeal the health care law, repeal Dodd-Frank, repeal all these regulations. Now, I don't think President Obama is going to have a change of heart. I don't think he'll propose that tonight. But at a minimum, what we should do is we should at least put a moratorium on new regulations. That's why I introduced a bill, the Regulation Moratorium and Job Preservation Act, right before we left on break. We should pass that bill. And that would basically what that would do is it impose a moratorium on regulations until our unemployment rate.
The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Gentleman from Colorado.
I ask for a record vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And this is likely to be the last recorded vote of the day. It's a vote on the rule for a bill expanding charter schools in the U.S. Also covers the Intelligence Authorization Bill, which the House will likely take up tomorrow. On the charter schools bill, if the rule passes, there's an hour of general debate, and they will consider 8 amendments. And the House is expected to wrap up work around 4 o'clock this afternoon so that the chamber can be cleared for President Obama's speech this evening to a joint session. The speech is at 7, and the House should gavel back in sometime ahead of that. We should see coverage starting at about 6:30, and we'll have it all for you here on C-SPAN.
On this vote, the yeas are 237, the noes are 163. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. House will come to order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. What purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 2218.
Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to House Resolution 392 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 2218. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack, to preside over the Committee of the Whole. The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 2218, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to amend the charter school program under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965.
House will be in order. Members, please take your conversations from the floor, clear the aisles. Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Klein, and the gentleman from California, Mr. George Miller, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota.
I thank the Chair, Mr. Chairman. The House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. The House is not in order. Committee will be in order. Members are asked to take their conversations from the floor and clear the aisles. Gentlemen may proceed.
I thank the Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of H.R. 2218 and yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, the House is still not in order.
Mr. Chairman, the House is not in order.
The committee will come to order. The Chair respectfully requests that members take their conversations from the floor and to clear the aisles. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Empowering Parents Through Quality Charter Schools Act is a key component of our efforts to reform the nation's education system and ensure more students have access to a quality learning experience. Mr. Chairman, could we have order in the House?
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I join my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who have been strong proponents of charter schools for the breadth of opportunities they offer students and parents. These innovative institutions empower parents to play a more active role in their child's education and offer students the priceless opportunity to escape underperforming schools. They also open doors for educators to experiment with the fresh teaching methods uniquely geared to meet the needs of their individual students. The stories of charter school success are impressive. Students who previously had little hope have been inspired by excellent teachers to reach new heights.
the tales of groundbreaking programs and initiatives at local charter schools have motivated surrounding public schools to improve. Parents have witnessed children of all backgrounds transition from struggling to excelling as a result of their charter school education. Unfortunately, there are not enough charter schools to meet demand, and hundreds of thousands of students remain on wait lists each year. The legislation we consider today takes important steps to encourage and support the establishment of more high-quality charter schools in communities across the United States. The bipartisan Empowering Parents to Quality Charter Schools Act will consolidate funding under the federal charter school program into the existing state grant program. This will allow state educational agencies, state charter school boards, and governors the freedom to award subgrants to support new charter schools as well as replicate or expand high-quality charter schools. To ensure states are facilitating the growth and expansion of charter schools, this act will give funding priority to those that lift arbitrary caps on the number of charter schools permitted in the state. The legislation also will provide priority to states that take additional steps to encourage charter school growth, such as allowing more than one state or local agency to authorize charter schools, or promoting charters as a solution to improve struggling public schools. As we work to increase the presence of charter schools in the United States, we must also protect limited taxpayer funds and make sure every dollar is well spent. It has been said that charter schools are the epitome of performance-based education. In exchange for increased flexibility and autonomy, these schools are held accountable for results. The Empowering Parents to Quality Charter Schools Act will ensure charter schools continue to be held accountable by supporting an evaluation of schools' impact on students, families, and communities, while also encouraging shared best practices between charter and traditional public schools. Charter schools are a valuable part of our efforts to improve the education available to our children. This legislation does not represent the whole solution. All of us recognize that additional measures must be enacted to support excellence and innovation in the American education system. However, this act takes an important step in the right direction. I'm very pleased that members of the Education and the Workforce Committee have put their differences aside and worked through a very bipartisan process to develop an exceptional piece of legislation. I'd like to thank members and their staffs for these efforts, and I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join with us in supporting this positive legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman